Ready for more stories? Welcome to Reminiscing, our Highline History, a radio show presenting the memories of our community in the Highline area. Listen to a new episode every week, Monday and Tuesday, with your host, Roger Price, at 106.5 LP FM, South King County.
Good afternoon. I'm Roger Price, and I'm a volunteer at the Highline Heritage Museum. And I'm in here today with Skip Young from the Hydroplane Museum down in it's kind of in the South Center, between South Center and Kent area. But I'm going to ask Skip some questions and different things about his involvement with hydroplanes, and I'm going to turn it over. And Skip, well, welcome, and I'm glad to get the opportunity to do this.
Well, thanks for having me, Roger. My involvement with hydroplanes goes back to when I was just a little kid. Grew up over in Leshigh Park. There's Seabourn's Marina down the hill from Seabourn's and the Yaba Yacht Basin. They had all kind of nice speed boats, few hydroplanes, race boats, and I just was fascinated by all of that. And then as a kid, followed the seafair races. And that's what started me off with all this boat business, we'll say.
Yes. And you lived fairly close to Lake Washington.
Oh, yes.
And I guess it was the Mount Baker, Leshigh area. And then they eventually went on to build the Stan Sayers
pits.
But so you were involved at a pretty young age. You go down there, probably ride your bicycle down to the lake and you probably heard the roar of the hydroplanes and thought, I'm going down there now.
Yes. Well, the thing with the boats was you had the sound. It was colorful, and it was exciting thing to be around, especially if you're a kid. You'd say, oh, okay, it's loud and it's fun.
Yes, and the first thing you probably noticed when you're riding down there to the lake is you probably saw the rooster's tails first.
Yes. You see all this water going up. Oh God, look at that.
Yeah, so that's kind of how you got involved in it.
And people were nice to us kids. They really were. We probably got on a lot of people's nerves, but people were really good to us. People were really nice.
Yeah, I bet that was a lot of fun. And you did this in the what was it, the later part of the 50s, early
60s.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, you were mentioning that.
Yeah, we go back to Century 21 with Bill Muncie, 61, 62.
And he was involved with he was the driver for the Thriftway, but during the World's Fair, and it was the Century 21.
Yes, Mr. Rhodes, who owned this Thriftway boat, used the boat to publicize the World's Fair.
And that was Rhodes had I think the Associated Grocers
yes
time. Mm-hmm. So that was quite a involvement there. And then you had you're probably one of your favorites. I don't know, what was your actual favorite boat back at that time?
Oh God, there were so many. I loved all the boats. Century 21 was one of my favorites. So that was one of them. Well, you got to understand too that during the time when the World's Fair opened, my neighbor, Mrs. Phelps, she was one of the original elevator operators. So all those kids in the neighborhood going out to space, we got free rides. So,
yeah, that was an added treat there.
Yes. And speaking of the World's Fair, that came about, the basis for that came about due to hydroplane racing. The people who put on the races saw a chance to put on something even bigger with the nucleus they derived from putting on the Gold Cup. They figured, they
Mhm.
said, what can we do now? Well, they said, oh, let's try for this World's Fair thing. So the
Oh,
people who were backing Seafair ended up backing the World's Fair. And then from World's Fair, we ended up with what? The Sonics and all these different other professional sports came afterwards.
oh yeah. So it was kind of an eye opener for
Yes,
the rest of the world.
yes,
Uh-huh. And it worked out pretty good. And that was all revolved around maybe a seafair to begin with. Sure, that was a big event back here in those days.
it was our first really professional sport, first really big time sport.
Oh, sure it was. Yeah, I remember like it was not like it was yesterday, but the whole summer revolved around seafair to me.
Yes,
And you got to see the Muncie in action, and then there was I remember the Miss Burien
yes.
became a well. You can kind of give us a little background on her too, on the Miss Burien year.
Miss Birion was an interesting, I see almost like an experiment in the sense that it was originally built as the Tempest by a guy named Norm Christensen, who was a marine engineer. And he built this boat in his garage, basically, entered it in a seafair, and had a guy named Bill Tonkin drive it. The boat did good. Then the next year, sponsored by the Bardall Oil Company, decided to sponsor the boat, and Norm Evans drove it. And then in 1958, it became Miss Burien, and I think was Myra Slovak drove it, and Bill Brow drove. Myra's filled in, but Bill Brow was the main driver. World's fastest milkman.
Yes, that's right. Vitamilk.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
yes. Because he had his limited called Miss Vitamilk, which is still around. It was restored, and his son Doug was running until Doug passed away last, Christmas around that time, and the boat's still around. I'm not sure who in the family has it now.
Oh, uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, I know the Brows were they were local. They lived out in the Normandy Park, kind of behind the lumberyard and QFC out there. And Becky, Bill's daughter, I went to school with her, and Jack was also a year behind me in school. But great family. I really,
Yes,
they did a lot for the sport, and they revived the actual hydroplane in Burien area. Got it really jump started.
and for years there was the Brow family has sponsored an award. It was the Bill Brow Fastest Qualifier Award. It's a nice plaque with top speed of the boats that were qualifying for the seafront races.
Oh,
Whoever the top qualifier was got the award.
yeah, well, I mean, and then they had some other drivers too. I mean, Bill wasn't always in the Bisburian, but I think Myra Slovak,
Yes.
which was also kind of an interesting uh, story about him and his flying his way out of what was it?
Czechoslovakia.
Yeah, so it was pretty interesting, him, Myra, and he was a pilot. Yeah.
Yes. And part of what made him attractive to the US government was when he defected his plane when it landed, unknown to him, they had all this latest Soviet technology and a few other things that the government found quite useful. So they um they asked Mr. Slovak what would he like to be career-wise. He said, I want to be a pilot, be a commercial pilot. Well, because he was an alien, he couldn't get a radio, he needed a radio operator's license. The only way to get that was our two senators, Magnuson and Jackson, had to propose a bill, get the bill passed, and the president, which was President Eisenhower, had to sign it. All of that did happen. And in 1959, Myra Slovak won the President's Cup. Well, the President's Cup is presented to the winner by the president. So Myra Slovak got to thank President Eisenhower personally for helping him, which was one of his career highlights.
Oh, I'm sure it was. Yes, that was quite an honor to do and to win the race besides is
Yes.
great. Wow. No, he was pretty feared when he got behind the wheel of a hydroplane. Sure. I can see now. And I'm not sure what boat he was actually.
His favorite, he said his favorite one was Miss Wahoo. He became national champion in 1958 with the Bardol, and he became national champion again in 1966 with Tahoe Miss.
Oh, okay. Yes, I remember the Tahoe Miss. Sure, very cool. Wow. Yeah, so then after then we also had oh, was it the Bardol was a pretty successful boat, and then I think the Thriftway when it was out tooling around the race with Bill Muncie, it ran into a Coast Guard cutter, I believe. I'm not sure what year that exactly was.
The Coast Guard cutter incident happened in 1958. Start of one of the heats. They're coming for the start, and the rudder came off the boat, and the boat ended up hitting Coast Guard cutter. And none of the personnel on the cutter were injured at all. Bill Muncie was injured,
Uh-huh.
and the Thriftway was pretty badly damaged. And then it got replaced by the third Miss Thriftway.
Oh boy, there was a lot of thriftways built back in those days, but they had pretty deep pockets, so they were able to uh, keep sustaining. And Bill Muncie, he kind of raced on the edge, seemed to me a lot. I mean, he had very fast boats, so he got the most out of a boat, I believe.
Yes.
So yeah, he was, and then there was Ron Musson also he was pretty good driver at that
Yes.
time. Then it was at the Bardol, wasn't it?
Yes.
Hmm. Yeah, but and then also I think the Miss Burien Chuck Hickling drove it for a while too, didn't he?
Yes. Yes, he did. He drove the second one. Yes.
Oh, okay. And that was after about 1960, wasn't the second?
60, 61. And then
Uh-huh. Yeah. Oh yeah, I remember back in those days. I used to, and a lot of the kids did. They'd build a little hydroplane out of plywood or then put it together, and then they'd tie a string to it, and then the other end would go to the back of their bike, or they could even run and pull it behind them running. But yeah, that was the hydroplane racing was really kind of really fun back in those days. So we had good times.
yes.
And then we went on up to let's see who eventually Dave Herensberger got involved in hydroplane racing, didn't he?
Yes. He came in originally 1963 with the first Eagle Electric as a sponsor, and then he came back in 1967. He bought the dollar bill and renamed it Miss Eagle Electric.
Oh, okay.
And then the next year, it was 68, the boat was winning a lot of races. Didn't win any as dollar bill, but when it became Miss Eagle Electric, it started winning. And
Oh, okay. And then he went on to Payne Packers.
yes,
Hmm.
Pan Pac had a series of innovative boats. Some worked, some didn't. But overall, his program was pretty successful.
Yeah, I think that was, is that the Pickle Fork or is,
He had the boat that had the first horizontal stabilizer wing
okay.
in
Hmm.
1973.
Oh, 73. Yeah, and that was that was a fast boat.
Yes, that's one of the. In fact, it's one of the boats that's in our museum, in the Hydroplane Race Boat Museum.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that.
Is that paying pack?
Oh, wow, that's cool. Yeah. Yeah, well, that's a must see for everybody to go down there to the Hydroplane Museum. But yeah, and then also I think well, I don't know. No, I don't know if Chip did Chip ever drive the pain pack? I don't.
No, but here's the funny thing about that. When Chip was first starting out in what called the Dionysus, 1976, slowest boat in the field. But Chip was making these perfect starts. This was a Seafair or Tri-Cities. There was a auction, and it was like have dinner with Chip Hanauer. The guy who had the biggest bid was David Hirnsberger.
Oh,
And ironically, how all that comes together when the crew was assembled for the turbine-powered pan pack. One of the first guys on the crew was Chip's father, Stan Hanauer. One of the first guys in the country to do boat racing with the turbine engine. He went to school for turbine school to learn.
oh, I see.
Yeah.
Sure. So yeah, yeah.
So Chip's father ended up on the pan pack crew. Chip
Oh,
was driving ended up driving for Squire, but
and his dad had a little advanced knowledge about
oh yeah,
turbines. Yeah.
yes.
So that was very instrumental in some of their success
Well,
too.
Chip's father did a little outboard racing back in the day, a little bit too.
Oh, I didn't know that. No.
Mr. Hanauer, Chip's father was a really gracious, nice man. He was kind of daredevil. He took a sailboat from Hawaii to Washington State.
Oh, cool.
I don't know if I'd have been that brave, but
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, no, that was a lot. That was a big undertaking to go that far
yes,
because you never know. You're kind of at the whatever the
different ports.
weather decides to do.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh boy, yeah, that was been a lot of work. It started float along in that thing, but yeah. So and then also after I believe somewhere 69 was it the Miss Burien became the Burien Lady, wasn't it,
No,
or a different
Beering
boat?
Lady is a different boat. The Beering Lady was actually an older. No, it was actually the 1962 Notre Dame. Then it became the replacement Budweiser in 1967. 67. But after that, after it was Notre Dame, it became a runabout for Shirley McDonald, who was the owner, the Notre Dame owner. But she ended up selling it to Bernie Little, and then Bernie ran it. And then Bob Murphy from Burien bought it and called the boat Burien Lady and ran it in 1970.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's and when we had the exhibit here in the museum last fall, we had some different photos of the Burien Lady and also the Miss Burien. But yeah, that was interesting. So, and she ran for what, a year
For a
or
few
two?
years, it ran 1970 as Miss Burien, no, Burien Lady. Um, then the next year it got sponsored by Smythe, a
Oh,
moving company, and they ran Smythe for I think 2 years,
I see.
71 and 72.
And Henley, he drove the boat, didn't he?
George Henley, yes, if I'm not mistaken, that was his first unlimited ride, and he came in second in 1970 Seafair Trophy race. Almost won the race. Would have been one of the if he had won, it would have been one of the biggest upsets in the history of the sport.
Oh, uh-huh.
Because here's this guy. a rookie in an underdog boat, their first year as a team, you know, not a lot of money, and they came that close to winning.
Wow.
You know,
No, that was yeah, and it takes money to run hydroplanes. It's not
oh yes. Well, even the Burien lady, the day after the race, the guy who was the crew chief was a young guy named Craig Taverner was his name. I'm down there. I'm down there with my bike. I'm watching the boat. And he comes over to me. He said, "Hey, kid." I said, "Yes." So you gonna be here for a while? I said, "Yeah, I'll be here for a few hours." He said, "Watch the boat for me."
Oh.
Then he drives off.
Oh, really?
So I got to watch Green Lady for a few hours. Like,
Oh yeah, here you are. You just
I'm just a kid. Like, oh,
you're in charge of the boat.
yes.
Well, that was fun. Yeah, something you'll remember for a long time. Yeah. Wow. No, that was a good, interesting stuff there. The Burien lady, the Miss Burien. It was and then the Vitamilk had the limited.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Which is still, like I said, that one is still around.
Wow. Uh-huh. Yeah, oh, that's pretty interesting. And then after we got it, well, let's see, we could go back to 1966, I believe, but that was kind of a tragic year as
Oh,
far as
yes.
outdoor
We had
outboard.
4 drivers were killed, 3 in one race. Rex Manchester, Ron Musson, and Don Wilson got killed at 1966 President's Cup. And then 2 weeks later, Chuck Thompson was killed in Smirnoff.
Wow, that was sad times back then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they probably took a serious look at the hydroplanes and how safe they were. Then I'm sure they made some improvements too after
Well,
that.
they did. I think what, in retrospect, what was going on was the boats, the power was exceeding the design limits back then. And that's what the theory is now. The Bardol accident, because it was a cab over, people would associated it with being a cab over. The problem with the Bardol accident wasn't because the boat was a cab over. It hit something. It hit a log or something in the water because we've got the shaft, the remainder of the shaft, and you can see on the prop where it's indented, where indication where it hit something.
Oh, of course. Sure. Nothing's gonna save it then.
Yes.
No.
And the blade broke off and pretzeled the shaft. And boat knows that.
Oh, yeah, that's a bad thing. Yeah, that's the part of the problems is this things floating in the water.
Yes.
Uh, yeah, and you have that boat down at the museum, don't you?
Well, we got the shaft of that one. We have the 58 Bartle, the 1958
Oh, the
Bartle.
58.
We have
Yeah,
that one down there.
that was probably Bernie Little. No, not Bernie Little. I'm thinking of who was
Holy.
the Holy Bardall,
Yes.
wasn't it?
Now
Yes.
that one, the 1958 Bartle, the national champion one, that Mr. Bardall donated that. God, was it the late 60s? He donated it to a local Goodwill store. And it sat there for about 30 years.
Oh.
It's in the Goodwill store for 30 years and then finally come out and then the museum got it and restored it. And they do exhibitions with it, but
Oh, I'll be darned. Oh, it's had in a Goodwill store.
for 30 years and now it's owned by Bruce McCaw owns it. He owns that.
Oh, he was the cellular phone
Yes,
macaw, wasn't
yes. He's got that one and the Slow-Mo 5 and I think Slow-Mo 3 as well.
Oh, uh-huh. Oh, wow, yeah. Well, I know you have quite an array of
Oh, God.
hydroplanes down there at yeah, and that's well worth people stopping by to see all that. I mean, uh, it was the Oh Boy Alberto, which was the Miss Burien
Yes.
at one time. Yeah, and then we had it in our parking lot here last fall.
Yes.
And that got a lot of attention. And then you have the is it the Slow-Mo 5 and
Slow-Mo
3?
5, yes. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
Slow-Mo 5. We got Slow-Mo 3 is in our other building right now, but we still have it.
Oh, I see.
We've got, oh God, there's two actual racing Miss Budweisers, one display Miss Budweiser. There's the pan pack, which we already mentioned, two Atlas Van Lines. There's a Squire shop. See if I've left any of them out. Of course, Bartall and
Uh-huh. Yeah, well, this it's a
plus we got two we're working on in the back, the 79 Circus and the Miss Madison.
Miss Madison. Yes,
They're being restored, and we've got a restoration of America's fastest boat, Hustler. It's a jet boat. Now that's being restored by Kip Brown. It's going to take a couple of years. Set the all-time record in 1967 at 285 miles an hour.
Whoa,
A guy named Lee Taylor drove it.
that's moving.
And then, 1977, Kitty O'Neill drove it. She was a famous Hollywood stunt woman. She set a women's record of 275 miles an hour.
Wow. Yeah, that's covering some water.
Yes.
Holy smokes. Yeah. So then after when Bernie Little got involved, that kind of was another stage of hydroplane racing. And you mentioned earlier, well, we were talking earlier about Bernie, and he met
Oh, Bernie and August Bush.
mhm.
Now, those two, well, first of all, Bernie ended up with a four-seat boat. Well, maybe we want to tell you a little about the four-seat boat story. There was a TV show, Route 66,
Mhm.
and they were using this boat in this series. Bernie reading the paper, sees it, find out, sees this nice-looking boat, finds out it's owned by Guy Lombardo. So he knew Guy Lombardo, called him and said, hey, I want to see your boat. Can we have lunch? Sure. We'll have lunch. Bernie falls in love with this boat, has to have it. What does it take to get this boat? He said, well, actually, Les Stoddicker has it. Stoddiker's the guy who built it. Stoddiker's up in Detroit somewhere. Bernie has discussions with him. What ends up happening, Bernie has a 37-foot yacht. Mrs. Little, his wife, has just got done fixing it up, doing the interior, has it all pretty like she likes it. What happens is Stoddicker doesn't want money. He wants the yacht. So they trade boats. Mrs. Little was not happy with her husband at all. She's like, what do you mean? What's this thing? This four-seat, what is this?
Yeah.
So Bernie is up with this four-seat hydroplane. So he had it up at his office. It's at Peter Knight Airport in Tampa. Goes out there on the runway. Mr. Bush comes in because he would rent cars and things from Bernie. Sees his boat. Said, what's this? Oh, Augie, this is my new boat. Oh, you want to go for a ride? Yes. Bernie, Mr. Bush, and a few of the couple of Budweiser vice presidents. They're out in Tampa Bay having a great time. Vice presidents are scared to death. They request, please drop us off at the dock. So it's Bernie and Mr. Bush, two kids playing out there, 140 miles an hour out in Tampa Bay. They're having a good time. They come back in. Mr. Bush asks Bernie, hey, Bern, how much does it cost to sponsor one of these things? Bernie Lowe says, $5,000. Hey, why don't you sponsor me? Handshake deal, 40 years. That was the Miss Budweiser sponsorship deal. One other thing that Bernie did, a couple things he did, was 1980 in Tri-Cities. The Budweiser, the Griffin one that we have in the museum. Bernie decides he wants to take it out himself. He borrows Steve Reynolds' helmet, Tom Kaufman's life jacket. The qualifying speed was 100 miles an hour. You had 4 or 5 boats that had trouble meeting it. Bernie goes out and Miss Budweiser does 3 laps at over 110. He's
Mhm.
just out there joyriding. Comes back in. He had his time. One other thing Bernie did was at Seafair was 1984. Vice President Bush was a guest of his in the pits. And there became this big uproar in the pits. I found out later from one of the drivers why there was a big uproar. Bernie had offered to Miss Budweiser to George Bush to take it out. Hey, George, you want to take it out for the spin? And the Secret Service was begging the vice president, please don't do this.
Now,
So,
yeah, I bet the security didn't want that happen.
oh God, yeah, no, because the only reason how I was able to find out, one of the drivers told me that's because there was no word at anything. He said, "Oh, Bernie offered Bud to," and we're like, "What?" So yeah, that's why the pits were locked down. All that. So,
Oh, sure, of course. Yeah, that is. Oh, that wouldn't have been probably a good plan, but no, wow, that's quite an interesting story. All right, probably, yeah.
Bernie was quite the guy, though. He did a lot for the sport. He was really quite the guy.
Yeah, he sure did. I mean, he kept her going for a long time. You know,
Yes.
he may have seemed like a kind of a well, he was a flamboyant kind
Yeah.
of person,
Oh,
but
yes.
he was also very generous too with
Yes.
I mean, he was very fair about things, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, just from watching him on TV. But yeah, and then going back a few more years now, I want to go back to the 50s again. But
Yes.
and back when the old slow-mo 4,
Yes.
slow-mo 5 used to start on the other side of the floating bridge and head for the start finish line and
Yes.
get wound up pretty good speed.
The flying start. Yes.
Yeah, those are fun times. Yeah. And I remember seeing videos of I believe it was a slow-mo 5 that did the flip, wasn't
Yes.
it?
Yes. The somersault flip.
Oh, that was spectacular.
Lou Fagel was very fortunate he wasn't killed in that accident. He was banged up, but he survived that. He never raced after that. But
Oh,
he lived he did live after that. Slow-mo 5 ended up being repaired, ran as Miss Seattle, and it ran under a couple other names. The boat ended up running and the racing for about 16 years,
wow.
which was unheard of. Those boats back then, you're looking at 3 to 5 years maximum,
Oh, uh-huh.
Usage.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That was on every highlight in the country that probably that later that weekend or something. But yeah, those were fun times back then. And then the also was it was the 707, wasn't it?
Oh, the
bear.
barrel roll, yes.
Mhm. That was
Tex Johnston, yes.
mhm. Yeah, that was quite another.
Yeah, the Boeing people were not real happy initially with that. And then when they started getting a lot of orders for the plane, because they asked him, well, why would you do that? He said, I'm selling airplanes. That's what his reply was,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
that's what it ended up doing.
It sure is. Yeah, but after seeing that,
Well, they had a big stage, so it's like, why not?
the Boeing, yeah, I think Boeing were involved in the hydroplane.
Boeing has built more boats than they know that they've had a hand in.
Oh,
Yeah, oh yeah. There's some that they know they've been officially a part of, and there's some that I think there's a lot more that they've been an unofficial part of,
uh-huh.
you know.
Yeah, I didn't know that. No, well, that's more power to them,
And
whatever.
then they had a surplus store called Boeing Surplus where boat racers would go and buy all kind of little metal parts and all that were helpful to.
Oh, uh-huh.
Oh yes.
Huh. Yeah, they were into the boat racing besides. Sure, that's pretty cool. And we also had Chip
Yes,
Hanauer. Yeah,
yes.
he was very involved and he was
Chip
very
is
successful.
Chip is the second winningest driver, or no, third. I think it's third. I think he was one short of Muncie's record, and he retired. He retired. He didn't want to break Bill Muncie's record.
Oh, he was honoring Bill
Yeah,
Muncie.
yeah. He didn't want to break it. And I was surprised, but then again, he's very principled guy.
I
Very
really
disciplined,
admire that actually.
you know.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. It's kind of like I always thought that Lou Gehrig's record for consecutive games played was something nobody. And then Cal came along and
Uh,
beat it. And I guess you can look at it two ways. I was hoping nobody would ever beat Gehrig because he played through so many injuries and health problems.
yes,
But yeah, that's just how it goes. But yeah, Chip was and he had no matter what cockpit he climbed in, he had success.
Chip. I have to agree with you. He was what Squire he won, Circus he won, um, Budweiser he won, Miller he won.
Hmm.
You know, Pico he won. You know,
Yeah, he had a feel for the boat
yes.
and he knew how to take advantage of every little.
Plus, he was very disciplined about the racing.
Hmm.
And in fact, one year he took off to do car racing one year.
Oh,
Because car racing was actually his first love.
oh,
He ended
what?
up in the boats because there weren't much in the way of cars around the Seattle area.
Hmm.
How he got involved with the boats, him and his father and his brother went camping as a kid. And next, right across from him was these little outboards running. And Mr. Hanauer was looking for Chip. He was over there watching these little outboards. Decided he wanted to do that. And his father said, "Well, how are you going to pay for this?" He said, "I'm gonna get a paper route."
Oh,
He got a paper route and he got a paper route, cut grass, did all kind of errands and raised the money because it was back then it was $125 to get this boat. That's a lot of money around 1961 or two
oh, I
for a
do bet
kid
it
to do
was.
that. Yeah.
Hmm.
And he earned that and then got his first low hydro J stock. He was in the J stock class.
Oh, oh, uh-huh.
And he got got beat regularly by a girl named Janice Lee. That was who dominated the class back then.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And then he gradually, yeah, then he gradually just worked his way up.
Yep. Uh-huh.
Um, and had a
Very
very,
successful career.
oh, absolutely.
He's a good guy too.
Uh-huh.
Really great guy.
Yeah, well, I know it was I know every summer when I was in the late 50s, early 60s and even the early 70s, boat racing was uh really I was really liked looking forward to
Oh yes.
hydroplane racing.
Yes.
So, and it was neat to have Miss Beery. And I remember back, I believe it was it was in 58, 59. It was what the first of the Hydro Highlights Parade in Burien. And it would, the first year, I think there was 8 unlimiteds and 20 limiteds in the
Ooh.
parade, and it ran from 10th Southwest all the way down 152nd to in front of Highline High School, which was a long stretch of road, but the hydroplanes were involved, and this was in between the 4th of July parades in Burien.
Okay.
There was several years there that they had the hydro highlights parade instead. But yeah, it was always something I really looked forward to in the summertime. So it was good times.
The parades are always good events for the boating community and for the community at large to interact at. They're
Mhm.
always fun.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And we did to bring out, back then, Burien wasn't that big, but we'd get 40,000 people that would come out to watch that parade. It was amazing.
That's an amazing crowd.
It sure was. So, yeah. Well, well, yes. Well, I'm gonna thank you, Skip, for doing this. This was very interesting. I've learned a ton today, but and I recommend everybody go down and check out your museum, your hydroplane museum down there in kind of the South Center, Kent area, and check that out. And then we're going to wrap this up. But so that was a good interview. Thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.